All right, everybody. Thank you once again. I know I'm getting a start here just a couple minutes early, but thanks for joining me for the post-2024 general election live stream, Ask Me Anything. Again, the way these usually work is you can type in your questions to me, and depending on where it is on your screen, probably in the side here, just type in your questions, and it shows up like this question down below. So while I'm trying to answer your question, I will have it on the screen below, and depending on how far off topic I go while we're talking, you'll at least know what the question I'm attempting to answer at that time. So again, it was election night last night, and so there's usually going to be a lot of interest in this. I can tell I'm going to get a lot of questions. I already have a ton of them in the queue right now. I'm going to do my best to get to as many of them as I can, and I'll try to avoid doing too many duplicative questions. But it's going to be, I got a feeling it's going to be just a busy Ask Me Anything event. So hopefully you'll bear with me on this, and appreciate it as we're doing another live stream here in the We the Govern studio. And I got a little different color in the background here, just celebrating, I think, from last night, at least at a national level. But there's a lot to talk about, and I imagine that we'll be getting into both judging from just a quick sampling of questions I looked at, there'll be probably questions related to both the national side as well as the state side of things. One of the issues or things I try to do in the beginning of the show is just to outline different places I'll be speaking at coming up, and I don't have anything coming up in the next month or so, at least on my calendar. I know I had a couple of events on Monday in Pierce County and in Clark County. I do believe I'm doing an interview with Brandy Cruz tomorrow. I think it tentatively set up, but I don't think she airs that live. I think it ends up being pre-recorded and then put up a little bit later. So we'll see how that goes. But generally, I'll try to give you a heads up if during my live stream, if I'm going to be on any other radio show or any other appearance or events that I'll be speaking at. I oftentimes tend to do tours of the state over the next couple months, different groups that want to have me come and speak and talk about the election results in a little bit more detail. So if you're a member of one of those groups or you want them to come and have me come and speak and make a presentation, just let me know and reach out to me, and I'll be happy to schedule that if I can and speak to any groups, especially activists who are interested in actually getting organized and going to make more of an impact moving forward. Another quick thing, some of you who are logging in right now, you probably were at the Let's Go Washington event. I still have my name tag from last night. I didn't get home till like 1:30 in the morning, but I was at the Let's Go Washington party, which was up in Kirkland at Vossler Studios. Some of you might have been at the GOP event, which was down in Bellevue, not that far away, but I ended up staying there. They had awesome food. They had a really good, really amazing presentation location there, and it was great to see Brian Haywood do his presentation before and after the initial stage of election results were announced. And that's where I was when everybody found out that Trump was indeed going to be the next president of the United States, which is just an epic and historic event in itself. And there's a lot to talk about that here. And judging from these questions, I anticipate a bunch of you will be asking questions about that. So let's just get into it right away. I see a bunch of you online, and there's a ton of questions, and I'm a little nervous about my ability even to get to these. Let's start with the first one down here from Susan. Glenn, what is your opinion on Ferguson and the malfeasance case against him? Well, I get emails. I've had periodic emails on this over the last couple months about the malfeasance case. And listen, I mean, anybody that thinks that they can pull something like that off, I think that's great. I don't have high expectations for that producing the type of result that I think some people are hoping for. I generally don't believe in miraculous solutions to significant problems like Ferguson, and I think you're more likely to achieve more long-lasting results with just a lot of hard work and grinding away on building up a coalition and effective candidates to run against them, and building the program that would actually generate more long-term impacts to the state than having some kind of secret sauce lawsuit that has the ability to make an impact on them. And I tell you, as somebody who's been in court a lot, many times on a lot of different issues, I'm still in court in a couple cases, I believe. So I'm willing to go down the legal route when it needs to be done or when I have no choice. But I'm not entirely sure that's going to produce some of the results that people think or have been promoting it as. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, the big issue with Trump, and I recorded a video today. I'm going to be launching it probably right after the show or really early in the morning tomorrow. Just my initial reaction to some of the elections from last night. And at least on the federal level, we pretty much know what's going on. At the state level, because there's still they say about 800,000 more votes to count in Washington State. They've counted about 2.8 million, I believe, so far. But I actually think it's closer to about another million votes that they'll end up getting in, million ballots, I should say, that they still have to count. And so with that volume of ballots still to be counted, there's a lot of impact depending on trend lines and results that we're seeing that could actually shift some of the close races that we still see out there. Historically, it's usually shifted to the positive for Republicans. That's been the historical result. There's no guarantees that that's exactly what happens, but that's what's happened historically. So there's a lot of Republicans that are down now, just like they were a couple years ago, the day after the election, and then they were able to catch up with the late ballots that came in. So I'll get into that probably later on, but I do want to make that point. It's just true. One of the reasons why I don't do a full video rundown of election results in Washington State until a week later is that there's so many ballots coming in that you really have to wait until the big bulk of, say, 800 to 900,000 of what ballots are left are counted to actually get a pretty good assessment then, because then whatever remnant comes in the next week or so, usually it's a little too small to make too much of an impact. So unless you're down to just a handful of vote difference just a handful of votes making the difference in a race, usually you're going to have a pretty good idea at that point in time where it's going. We can make an assessment on some things tonight, but there's a lot of other things that we don't know about. So anyway, but I don't think the malfeasance case is going to result in what people would hope that it results in. And if it does, that'd be great. I'll be cheering you on, but I just don't think that it's likely to produce that kind of result. Marvel visionary, what happens to capital gains tax here in Washington when Trump implements his new tax cuts? Well, generally, the capital gains in like a state tax doesn't typically get impacted by federal tax policy changes unless for some reason the state tax is tied to those federal taxes, which they usually don't do. The capital gains tax that Washington State has isn't tied to a federal tax, so I don't think there's any impact. The one reform that Trump had mentioned as tax policy reform was to restore, and I don't even know that I agree with this, but was to restore the ability of local people to deduct the amount of taxes they pay at a state level from their federal taxes. And the reason why I kind of disagree with it is that it encourages states to increase incompetent and corrupt tax policy and just keep raising it. I think assuming the feds will kind of make up for it on the other end, and that it's not as much of an impact. And when Trump, his tax cuts from, I believe, 6-7 years ago, when those were implemented originally, they actually eliminated that loophole. And one of the things that happened was people in high tax states like California and Illinois and New York really were impacted more by the tax policy than they had been before. And so since those are dominantly blue states run by Democrats, they were particularly furious about that. And so that would be like, if there's some kind of an impact that's that type of an impact, then that could have a change on, but really it's not really a policy change, it's just individual changes for people who are filling out their taxes for that. Nancy Bryson, could you please give us a rundown of who won the races? Thanks. Yes, up to a point. And I'll tell you, this is what's hard about this, with a million ballots still to count. of which, if statistically the numbers stay about the same, so 39% of those votes to 40% are probably going to go for Trump, 60% are going to go to Harris, and so when you're looking at the national popular vote, like that's still a decent number of votes that get added to that popular vote, so that actually narrows Trump's margin of victory, but not probably by a lot, but it will narrow it slightly. So it's an interesting issue. Imagine all those votes then trickling down to all these really close races in Washington State. The big, let's look at the overall statewide offices. Republicans lost every position that they ran for statewide office, with a couple of caveats in this statement. The race that's too close to call for anybody, and there's no way to know for sure for another week or so, is definitely a Supreme Court case, because Dave Larson is within striking distance. It's a statistical tie. It's about 10,000 vote difference between the two of them, and Larson looks like he's got a really good shot, depending on how late ballots trend, in actually becoming the next Supreme Court justice, which would be a big deal. Now, that's a nonpartisan position, but it would be so nice and so refreshing and such a change of pace to have at least one person on the 9-person Washington State Supreme Court who believes that math is real, that the English language means what it says, who's actually read the state constitution and believes what it says. It can have a big impact, actually, on decisions. We saw this back when Jim Johnson was on the Supreme Court and Justice Sanders were on the Supreme Court. They had a huge impact on the way that court made decisions. And sometimes, even if it is in dissent, their writings had a big impact, and it influenced the other judges, especially with the low caliber of Supreme Court justices that we have right now, and their defective reasoning that is repeatedly conducted on a very political basis on the Supreme Court. It would make a big difference. So that's a big race to watch, because it's basically neck and neck. There's no way to know at all where that race is going to come out right now. But I would say Larson's got an edge in a way, because the late-breaking ballots tend to, on average, break for Republicans, which then gets us to the 2 congressional races that are close enough that we'll have to watch these late-breaking ballots over the next few days. Joe Kent is behind right now. Now, there was a ton of, I live in the 3rd District, there was a ton of outside groups that just threw ad after ad at him. I mean, every YouTube video you watched, every television ad that was in the district, hundreds of mailers that were coming in, overwhelmingly attacking Joe Kent and talking about what a terrible, evil guy he was. So he's down he's at about 48% plus, give or take. Here's the thing, though, with that race. If you looked at it a couple years ago, he was also down about that much, and then he closed the gap very close with late ballots and ballot rehab. Now, there's about 2,500, probably close to 3,000 ballots in the 3rd Congressional District, which spans 7 counties, that need to be rehabbed. Which, what that means is that they're basically, the signatures didn't match, they're rejected for some reason, and you have an ability to go out and get the original voter, in theory, to sign a paper and say, hey, I missed my signature, but here it is, please count my ballot, that kind of thing. And so volunteers flood the zone, they go out. Republicans are actually becoming pretty good at doing this, and if you live in that area, you should volunteer to do this. You'll only be doing it for about a week or so. But collecting those ballots and getting them counted in a dominant Trump-friendly district that's likely to shift some votes in Kent's direction. Now, that by itself won't be enough for him to get over the top, assuming that he can, but it does give him an opportunity, and there's some belief that by observers that the 3rd Congressional District could change from where it looks like right now. But at this point in time, he is not leading. He is following. So, but it's close enough that these late ballots could have a really big impact. They think there's about 250,000 ballots still to be counted in the 3rd Congressional District alone. The other one is actually the 4th Congressional District, where Newhouse is leading Sessler right now, 2 Republicans, so there's no Republican change of control as far as how it influences what occurs in D.C., but it is one that there's a lot of attention to, because Newhouse is the last of 2. I had made this mistake once before. I had a video where I said he was actually the last congressman who had voted to impeach Trump still in office. I'm wrong. He was actually the last of 2. So out of the original 10, I think, or so that had voted to impeach Trump, Newhouse is one of the 2 that are still in office today. So from that standpoint, it generated attention, even though it's a very Republican district. And Sessler and Newhouse are very close. Newhouse is leading leading, and he obviously was outspending Susser 6 or 7 to 1, but the gap there is much narrower even than the 3rd congressional district. So these late breaking ballots that come in, we'll have to watch over the next couple of days, see how close that gets. Then let's shift to the initiatives. One initiative, which is Initiative 2066 to repeal the gas tax, is leading, and it's close. It's not leading by as much as I would imagine it would have normally been leading by, but it is ahead, and that's likely to be the next initiative that passes. The other 3, I think, are too far away to be statistically likely to close with late-breaking ballots, even if they move in that direction. It is an indication of the $42 million that were spent attacking Brian Haywood and in opposition to these initiatives that Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and all these billionaires funded, plus the blizzard of all these types of mailers that came out. I mean, it was just an endless barrage. And worse than any of that, I don't think even the ad campaign was as significant as the weirdly written statement that the legislature allowed the attorney general to write in, and it was a law that was changed a couple years ago to stop tax increases from being proposed by initiative because it gave them this little window of putting their thumb on the scale and putting these confusingly worded statements that were not really representative of what was there, and not even getting an ability to challenge them in any effective way, and shifting the balance so that voters were confused, and they would even if they supported the policy, they'd vote against it because they don't understand it. So that was probably the biggest issue that came out as it relates to the initiatives, and that was something that I've heard others people were also speaking to Brian Haywood about at the Let's Go Washington event last night, and but in the big scheme of things, he had pushed 7 initiatives. 3 of them became law. It looks like this 4th one's going to become law, and it looks like he's losing on the other 3. That is definitely still the most successful initiative effort in the history of Washington State. And so not winning everything is disappointing, but being able to win as much as you can is a big step in the right direction. And if you've paid any attention to Brian Haywood, I suspect over the last few years, you're going to notice that he will learn from things that go wrong and come back and do them better or fix those problems moving forward. So I'm interested in hopefully talking to him again and maybe getting another interview with him post-election and having him kind of explain some of that stuff for you, my audience. That'd be kind of fun. Let's see. Glenn, I told you when the minute I heard Ferguson was running for governor that he'd be installed. Well, I hope you voted, and that rather than just complain about it, that you actually went out there and voted against him, because otherwise that's not too much of a useful comment. Let's see. I'm going to hop down here. Thunderstriker, regular question and commenter here. Trump will spit out whatever comes to his mind. It may not materialize, so there should be nothing to fear, right? Yeah, listen, I'm just hoping that Trump does some of the policies that he has talked about. If I was in the Trump administration, I think one of the things I would prioritize is coming in and addressing election integrity issues around the country. One of the questions, and I raised this in my video that I did earlier today, is that, when you really look at the election results, the cumulative election results, especially the popular vote, from 2020 to 2024, there's an interesting trend line there that has yet to be explained, and that is, why is it that there were 18 million or so, I mean, we won't know, again, completely what that exact number is, but it appears there was a mystery 18 million ballots or votes or something that happened in 2020 that isn't happening this time. People should be asking that question because it's a statistical anomaly and an outlier that would indicate bad behavior in the election system that didn't seem to materialize this time around. Why? And that's a good question, and it's one people should ask. The other, and I don't know anybody who's going to honestly answer it, but at least it's a good question that should be asked. One of the groups of people around the country that I want to give great credit to are the other teams of people who were doing election integrity work, voter roll cleanup, observing, paying attention, engaging, stopping fraud, exposing fraud, especially in Pennsylvania, Texas, and Florida in particular. They aren't alone. There were plenty of other states. blue state, red state, doesn't matter. The work that they did, in my opinion, made a huge difference in some of the results that we saw this cycle, because I think they stopped a lot of dishonest, corrupt behavior. I think that they encouraged people to be more aware of how the system works. I think that they were able to clean up a lot of fraudulent problems that existed in the voter rolls. And also, I think just the fact that for the first time in 100 years, somebody on the Republican Party side, or at least that general spectrum of belief, was actually paying attention and looking. And I think, especially with, Dinesh D'Souza's movie where they were tracking cell phone tracking data, just the people who would otherwise do bad things had no idea how infiltrated they were. They had no idea how many people were paying attention to what they were doing. And I think that it did overwhelm the system. The too big to rig concept for a national election was, I think, an effective strategy and approach. But the reality is the things that make it work were small teams of people oftentimes. I mean, I know some of these people in these other states. I know of them. Some of them I've met. Some of them I've only talked to. Some of them I've done Zoom calls with. Some of them I don't know at all, but I just know by reputation. They ground away and they worked away despite the corrupt media, despite the shadow banning, despite the censorship, despite the threats, despite the leftist violence. Despite all of that, they ground away and they started doing things that were very practical. They don't garner a lot of headlines. They don't get a lot of attention. They aren't glory-seeking. They're not narcissistic self-promotion opportunities. They're really more about just doing this basic work of paying attention to what's going on and grinding away. And I think that is what made the difference nationally. And I think that's why you had such a difference in Pennsylvania. It's one of the reasons the long-term voter roll cleanup that was going on down in Florida that's changed the statistical difference in the number of registered voters down there. It wasn't because a bunch of Republicans moved into Florida. Some did, but that actually wasn't the big numbers that changed Florida. What changed is there was just suddenly, in the voter rolls, all of these fake, I'm going to say they're fake, and fake in the sense that they weren't real voters or legal voters. They disappeared off the voter rolls, close to 700,000 over 4 years. Similar voter roll cleanup that was being done in Texas actively, and it's going on today. And the one thing that people have to remember is that doesn't just stop because, hooray, you have red team wins or blue team loses. That's just nothing. That's something you have to keep grinding away on this stuff so that it becomes clear, transparent, open, and honest, as close as it's going to get. There's always going to be fraud. There's always going to have people that want to try to do dishonest things. And if we can get some of that cleanup here in Washington State, it should be a priority for the Trump administration to do that everywhere. Specifically, an easy step that they could make is just to simply let us have the actual list of people who are not U.S. citizens in Washington right now. And these aren't illegals. These are people who are here on F-1 visa status or J-1 visas or whatever visas they happen to have come here under. So they're legal. They aren't going to be kicked out of the country right now. But just make that list public. There's nothing to hide. And with that list, we'd be able to see exactly how many of them are registered to vote. And the answer is probably almost all of them. Then the second question is how many of them did vote, which we should be able to get from the public record once we know who they are. And we should also be able to look at things like, did they contribute to campaign finance, to campaigns, which is illegal. So they don't get in trouble for that. So they aren't the ones that get in trouble for that. But what would happen is those campaigns that have accepted the money, it doesn't matter whether Republican or Democrat, they're going to have to give back those funds. So forfeiting those funds would be a good step in the right direction. But either way, that would be something that the Trump administration could do day one when they get into office. So that's a simple thing. It doesn't completely fix everything at all, but at least it's a minor step in the right direction towards helping with some voter integrity cleanup issues in our state. And I know that could be something that we could impact right away. It's another thunderstriker question here. It's also crazy. Many of the people who would be hurt by Trump's campaign threats actually voted for him. That's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about exactly there, but the people the left obviously, had meltdowns and they'll never question their own policies or how crazy or insane they are. I did hear some people starting to question, some people on the Democrat side or leftist side of the world maybe question that perhaps it's not the optimal public policy to decide that grown men should be able to come in and beat up on girls in sporting competitions, and that women's sports maybe shouldn't be taken over by men who are willing to basically beat up on women and kick them out and of their sporting competitions. I mean, I've observed this now happening a couple times. If you want to see a bunch of angry and pissed off girls go to a sporting competition and watch their friends get beat up or kicked off the podium or prevented from going to state or something else that happens because some boy decided that he wants to be a girl and goes and competes in that competition. So that's a frustrating thing. Why they decided to die on that hill than any other one was strange, but most people don't think that's actually, I know the surveys I've seen recently, 85% or more of the people think that that's truly a ridiculous and absurd policy, and yet that seemed to be the highest priority that some of these leftist campaigns have. Plus, obviously, their pro-crime agenda. Despite even Bob Ferguson recognized this in his political campaign. He may be a pathological liar, but he pretended that he actually cared about public safety, although he had zero evidence in his history that he's ever cared for it, and lots of evidence that he actually doesn't care for public safety. He had to at least pretend that way, or at least he felt that he had to pretend that way, and run massive multi-million-dollar ad campaign trying to convince you and other people that he actually isn't the pro-criminal guy that he is. So that indicates that at least there's some recognition with some people on the left that their crazy pro-crime policies didn't work out. And you can see that in California, where they passed that initiative and also kicking out some of the DAs, the Soros-installed DAs from a while ago. There's a question here from Thunderstriker again. How was Donald Trump able to win the popular vote? No, I mean, I think I've already kind of addressed this a little bit earlier. I do think some of the election integrity work has helped, but separate and on top of that, obviously just running a much better campaign. Part of this is also the Democrats being weird and running. I don't know that they could have found somebody worse on their side. I think it's always a mistake to presume that just because you don't like the other side or that you're in opposition to them, it's always a mistake to presume that they're all idiots or they're all evil. I mean, some are evil and some are obviously not the brightest, sharpest tools in the shed. But in this case, though, they definitely picked Harris, who was just egregiously incompetent at all levels. I've never seen anybody at that level of political experience totally incapable of functioning in any kind of normal way with people or speaking in public without a teleprompter. And that was really odd. When I was in college Republican at Columbia University in the heart of darkness, New York City. I brought a bunch of my college Republican friends. We were going to go down and confront Bill Clinton, who was running for the nomination, 92, for the presidency on the Democrat side. And at the time, it wasn't clear to us that he was going to become the president. We just knew that he was coming down the Donahue show, and it was easy to hop on the subway and go down and get in the audience, which we did. And I thought it'd be fun to go down there and ask him some questions. But the Donahue show was corrupt, and they had pre-selected people to ask questions. They didn't really let the audience ask any questions. So even though we went in, did the socialist thing, spread ourselves out amongst the audience, and we had some prepared questions, we weren't able to ask them. So afterwards, I went up and talked to him personally, and you could actually do that. It wasn't, it was early in the process. He had Secret Service around him, but it's not like he was, phalanxed around with all these guys around him. You could actually come and talk to him. And I did, shook his hand. And Bill Clinton lost his cool. I was asking him a question about his pot smoking and playing an all-white golf course. And he kind of, yelled at me and stuff. But nevertheless, that guy was a consummate politician who was capable of speaking to people extemporaneously. And he was, for all of his faults and problems, of which there are many, he at least had that ability to do that. And I always had this presumption that that's how most politicians would be. And it does seem lately that I'm surprised at how many people, and this is true even sometimes on the Republican side, that seem to be not able to even function in settings like this. Like, I don't know how you've gotten that far along the public policy process or the political process without having that ability. And I don't know how you wouldn't even at least get trained up to fake it. And yet Harris seemed to have skated through without any of that experience, and I think it came across at critical moments when she was in the spotlight, and as much as people were trying to carry water for her, I think it hurt her quite a bit. Let's see, Deanne Sanderson. I've been in Washington 5 years. What's the full story of $30 car tabs and Ferguson's revenge against Iman? Well, I don't probably have enough time to tell you the full story, but I'll give you an abbreviated version of it. Tim Iman here was basically, an entrepreneurial kind of guy who got involved in signature gathering for, at the time, it was in the 90s, and it was to reject the taxpayers funding the replacement to the Kingdom. So it was about a sports stadium. Billionaires were going to come in, and I think it was Paul Allen at the time. Billionaires wanted the taxpayers to cover some of their costs. I know it sounds familiar because this is the attitude that Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and Nick Hanauer have always had, right? Make the taxpayers help cover my own costs that I would otherwise spend my own money on, even if I have enough money to spend on it. So in this case, it was a billionaire, and I'm pretty sure it was Paul Allen at the time, who wanted to tear down the Kingdom and then put in a new stadium and make the taxpayers pay for it. And people in Seattle didn't like that, and King County didn't like it. They collected signatures and they rejected it. And Tim Iman went out and collected signatures and felt like he was part of that. That's what got him involved in signature gathering, or just even being familiar with the process at all. He was a very unpolitical guy before that. And he started the first $30 car tab. Now, I'm skipping over some stuff, but basically in 1998, Tim Iman went out and helped with other people, lots of other people helping him. They went out and collected signatures to get a $30 car tab initiative passed, and they were successful in getting on the ballot. People voted for it. And it was fought legally in court, and at the time, the governor, the Democrat governor, and I believe, and it was the Republican legislature at the time, but anyway, they passed it anyway. There was some challenge in court, and but the governor came out and said, absolutely, $30 car tabs will come back there. Of course, big government being what it is, they kept adding expenses. So $30 car tabs started becoming $50 and $70 and $100 car tabs again. And remember, up until that point in time, I remember when I was trying to renew my driver's license or vehicle registration, I always drove crappy cars, oftentimes like I do today. They aren't very small, not that fancy, very old. And you'd be spending hundreds of dollars to get your car tabs renewed every time. Even back in the 80s when that actually meant that it was that much money. It'd be the equivalent of like $400 today. And it was very frustrating. It was a huge part of the expense for you, even if you were like low income and you're struggling to make ends meet. And now suddenly you're when gas was $1 a gallon, you're spending hundreds of dollars every single year to renew your car tabs. So it was frustrating. And so that was something that people were upset about, and get it down to $30 was very positive. Tim Iman actually did that several times in a row. The last time he did it under threat of litigation as Bob Ferguson was coming after him. Now, essentially, Tim Iman just became a tax-cutting guy with a series of initiatives, most of which would pass. Not all of them, but most of them would pass. I think he's got about 17 initiatives qualified. 11 of them actually were voted on and approved by the taxpayers, and had all kinds of financial impacts in a positive way, saving taxpayers of Washington billions of dollars over a number of years. And the greatest threat to bureaucracy and government is when you take away their tax dollars, because your tax dollars is the lubrication and the currency that they use to promote themselves and their own power. Nature of bureaucracy is to perpetuate itself, and they perpetuate themselves by taking away more of your money and using it to destroy their dreams, kill squirrels if they live in New York, pet squirrels in particular, or do other things to hurt you. That's what government does. They can't help themselves. It's what government does best. Same thing with the car tabs. Take your money, squander it on whatever project that they think they need, and no matter how incompetent or wasteful or corrupt they might be, the truth is the world doesn't have enough money for them. They want more of it. And so Tim Iman was able to capitalize on that and really get a lot of very popular tax-cutting initiatives passed over a period of time. $30 car tabs was his first one that he did, and it turned out it was his last one that he did, as well, which it also passed. And I think the success actually of his last one is what motivated Bob Ferguson and a bunch of the Democrats to decide to promote this impact statement that they inserted into these recent initiatives as a direct result of that. Now, the reason you mentioned the other part of this was Tim Ferguson's revenge against Iman was using the campaign finance laws, basically weaponizing them and then coming out and destroying Tim Iman's life with the campaign finance litigation that he's involved in. To some extent, I got involved in the campaign finance stuff back in 2016 when I started filing all those complaints and forcing Bob Ferguson to sue a bunch of his friends. and I forced him to sue about 19 of his friends. And at the time, and it caused all kinds of drama, and there's all kinds of other issues. Again, a longer story, but they did change the statute in 2018, and I don't think it's as easy for an attorney general to weaponize the system the way they did at the time. But legally, it'd be a little bit harder path to go down now than it was at the time with Tim Eyman. But that's what happened. They bankrupted Tim Eyman and used the legal process to destroy him. And I'm sure Ferguson wants to do the same thing to me, and probably most of the other Democrats do as well. There's a little bit. I'm simplifying this, but that's basically what happened. And so Tim Eyman is still kind of in the tail end of this abuse process, but it's been, I think that one started in 2012, so it's about 12 years of that particular sequence of abuses, and in the middle of that, he was still passing some initiatives. Let's see. Two separate questions. Should Rep eliminate the filibuster? Could voter ID law be passed through reconciliation? I don't think eliminating the filibuster is a good idea, and in fact, everything I've heard out of D.C. has been that they're going to keep it in place. So the filibuster is going to exist. The Republicans certainly do have a majority in in the Senate, but they don't have a majority to overcome the filibuster, or they don't have a filibuster-proof majority, which is interesting. If they had eliminated the filibuster the way the Democrats wanted, then the Democrats would have zero check of any kind, really, in the legislature right now. So I imagine the Democrats will rediscover the love of the filibuster moving forward. I guess it'd be funny if they in a just a power basis sort of way if they eliminated the filibuster temporarily for a while and then brought it back. But nevertheless, that's I don't think that's going to be what happens. Could voter ID law be passed through reconciliation? I don't know why you need to do that. You don't have to do reconciliation. You just simply pass it. And it's a very popular thing, and I don't think it's a bad idea to force Democrats going on the record to say that they do not want to know who's voting in these elections, and or racist statements that every Democrat seems to believe that for some reason minorities of some kind are unable to get ID of any kind, which is ridiculous. But that racist attitude dominates the Democrats, every one of them, and it seems to be their common feeling. Unless you happen to be one of those targeted ethnicities and then you know that it's ridiculous. I mean, surveys have shown requiring voter ID is a pretty logical and reasonable request. Let's see. Most of the states did, but some did not. This is another question from Thunderstriker. I was looking at the election results today. Most of the states are voting red for Trump. The question is the number, Electoral College. Trump dominates Electoral College and with the popular vote, so that's pretty interesting. I think we should make the popular vote electors from Washington State follow their own dumb idea on the popular vote and require them to vote for Donald Trump if they're going to actually follow their own rules, which, of course, they won't. They're going to say, no, we're going to go with the popular vote for Washington, which is just very funny. Blue Jay, we need to do what Nebraska did, break up the state, give King County 1 electoral vote and the rest of Washington's 11 electoral votes. Well, that's actually not how it works. The way Nebraska and Maine did it, and this has actually been an idea for a while now, is propose that you break up Washington into the Electoral College votes the same way that Nebraska and Maine do. And the way that would work in Washington is that each district would get, each congressional district, of which we have 10, would get 1 vote, and then 2 of them would be assigned to the Senate side of things, and those would be voted in the those would go with the way the whole state went. So those would be like an at-large electoral vote. That's that's legal. The Supreme Court's upheld this. It's possible. The only way I could see you doing that is through the initiative process, despite the recent experience that we've had. Since that's something that's actually not a tax increase, they would not be able to put that impact statement in there in the beginning. So anyway, we'll see how see how it could go. T, what is the malfeasance case against Ferguson, and how do we join for being made whole for damages? I don't think that's really what it is. I mean, the malfeasance case is basically a case historically where, and I believe it was thrown out later, but the original case said that he committed malfeasance while he was Attorney General based on a private lawsuit that was filed, and believe me, he's done far worse than this. But and then that case, there's an element of law that they're saying if you've been convicted of this in court, there's been a judgment against you in court that you cannot hold public office moving forward. So there's a little bit more than I'm explaining, and I'm very much simplifying it. I'm not doing a good job getting into the whole thing here, but I've got a lot of questions, and I need to try to get to most of these. But I don't know about you joining in on that. I suppose you could, but I think class action cases would be more effective against Ferguson. I think there's a lot of other opportunities you're going to have out there. I would try looking forward. These guys can't help themselves. Corruption is their middle name. Dishonesty and doing things, even if they're legal but they're corrupt, I think it's important to pay attention to what's happening, and we just have to do a better job, I think, getting that word out there. This isn't true. So Thunderstriker, I don't know why you're getting this information, but how did Kamala not manage to not win a single state? She won a bunch of states. She won California, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, New York. She just didn't win the majority, and she didn't get the Electoral College, and she didn't win even the popular vote, which is amazing because in order for that to happen, and you can look back at the numbers on this, and as they're updating their numbers, because again, we have foolish states like Washington that have this long delay of ballots coming in. Arizona, I think. California still has this delay. There's all these, the total numbers aren't there yet, but you can see that Trump actually, in states that he lost, he closed the gap on the popular vote substantially. New York, New Jersey, Illinois. I mean, it's pretty impressive, really, in some of those states. So anyway. That's just how it goes. Map looks so red, yet fungus won. Yeah, Ferguson. And this is from J-Dog. Yeah, yes, I mean, Ferguson definitely got a majority of the votes. Now, we don't really know the final numbers because of the nature and foolish decision to go to this all-mail-in voting system, because you get all these late ballots to come in. So we don't really know what the final numbers are and what the real gap is. If we go back and try to compare right now to 2020 numbers, it's not going to be an apples-to-apples comparison because we still have 1 million ballots or 800,000 ballots or whatever it is left to count, and then we'll get a better sense of what the true gap is there. I suspect Reichert will close a little bit, but the gap's too much to expect him to close that all the way. I don't see that happening unless there's just some amazing change this week. And there's something so unique about these last sets of ballots that they go that far on the Republican side. It would be statistically unlikely. So anyway, that's where it goes. Let's see. I don't know what you're talking about here, Thunderstriker. That's a question that doesn't even make sense to me. Doesn't it make you think it's sickening so many people just don't care about his accusations? I'm assuming Trump, but I don't know what you're really referring to there. At this rate, shouldn't all celebrities stop endorsing publicly? Well, that's a good question. Isn't it a time to just let the people choose, since every time you try to influence voters, it just backfires? Well, I won't say every time. I mean, celebrity endorsements are as old as time and elections. So vast majority of people in the modern era, right, they don't pay any attention genuinely. I mean, the people watching this show right now, I have about, 1,200 people, I think, that have logged on to the channel to watch this live stream today, which I can't believe there's that many of you that want to watch me talk about this stuff. But despite that, you're probably paying more attention to politics than the average person does. The truth is, most people are caught up there. They got economic issues, they got health issues, they got kids, they got a car to fix, they have a job question, they're looking for a job, some of the drama in their life, I don't know, they're looking to go party on the weekend, whatever it is. The vast majority of people do not spend more than a teeny fraction of their life thinking at all about politics, regardless of how much politics might influence their life. And so they can be influenced because there's probably more people watching the Kardashians than there are paying attention to politics. And so if the Kardashians come out and endorse you, that has the ability to influence some of those people and how they vote. Now, at the national level, because to a large extent, the groupthink has become so nasty and abusive, I think, with the media and the way the celebrities have kind of become part of this Borg approach to endorsing politicians, I suspect that that's actually changed a little bit now, where people are annoyed because you can see these millionaires and super wealthy people, and some of them billionaires even, trying to get you to vote for people that are actually, they hate you, they're going to institute policies that harm you, and it basically destroys the credibility of the celebrities this year more than any other time. I mean, it really does. This time is more than any other time. I've never seen it be so lopsided and so weird. And, of course, the media is all part of that game as well. So, anyway, Let's see. Why did Kamala take so long to concede the election? Just because she's just a shallow person and not that sharp, and they were probably hoping for some kind of miracle. Listen, it's not easy. Washington State actually encourages this type of behavior because you can't figure out, if you're within 3 to 4 points, maybe 5 points of an election on election night, you can't concede. It's idiotic to concede. You have to wait and see for a week where those ballots are going before you even know if you've lost the election or you've won the election. And so you don't want to concede early. You want to stick it out and then see where the votes go. And it'd be foolish for any Republican right now that's within 5 points of the election results on election night to concede yet. And so until you've had a larger statistical sampling of the remaining million ballots or so left to count. And so what happens is plenty of races, hundreds of them, get changed completely from what the result looks like on election night over the next week or so as these late ballots come in and get counted. And so because of that, the likelihood of somebody conceding is greatly reduced. And so it draws out the uncertainty and reduces the historic, typical way that you had elections for the last 200 years, where they would just concede, okay, you're right, you got enough votes, sorry, congratulations. We live in a country where we don't have to have violent revolution all the time. So, maybe I'll try again next year, but good for you. And, I'll do better next time. It's just kind of interesting. Any predictions on Trump's legislative agenda? No, I don't have any predictions other than I just hope that he actually gets his act together and does it. It depends on who he hires, and it's going to be so important. And that the lawfare and the leftists are going to do everything they can to sabotage everything. I'm a little more concerned about them blundering America into a war before January, if they can do so. These are the kind of crazy things I would expect them to try to do. This is funny. Siniera, Frankenstein, can I return all my survival supplies now? No, and you'd be foolish to do so. You have no idea what's coming, no matter who gets elected. I'm telling you, it's good in the sense that there's a potential, because the only hope that freedom and liberty has is to have people in there who actually care about it. And it isn't just Trump. It's really a majority of the senators, a majority of the congressmen, and then hopefully they can hold it together and actually get some policies passed that matter. I think bringing in people like Elon Musk, it could make a bigger difference than... I'm super skeptical of those things really coming out, but he impressed me with what he did at Twitter, firing 80% of the employees to no tangible impact on the platform, probably an improvement. And that level of efficiency that he seemed to demonstrate there, if he actually had the ability to bring them in and Trump's willing to actually implement that type of downsizing of big government, then you genuinely would be seeing changes that are generational in their impact and beneficial. He still has to deal with the debt and the deficit, which I think is a big deal. I know he says he has a plan. I don't think it's that easy to implement. And remember, you still have to play nice with others and get these other entities to work with you. And that's not as simple as people think. Let's see. Can you please explain exactly what the no vote on the capital gains tax initiative will mean to us? Will this be an additional tax on home and property sales? No, not yet. It's just a no vote means that it gets to continue, and then the Democrats at some future legislative session could decide, well, we lied when we got this tax here initially, and now we're going to drop it down and make it apply to even more people or at a lower level. In their emails, they've indicated, in previous drafts of the capital gains tax, they've already indicated that they're interested in doing that. So anyway, but we'll see. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. N plus Fold, they called, I don't know who they is, but said they called the race for Perez when there is less than 10,000 votes between she and Joe Kent and 100,000 votes still not counted. Doubt Clark County would go for Perez. What can do? Well, I mean, you don't do anything other than going out and rehabbing ballots of those. You have close to 3,000 that have been rejected for missing signature or a signature that doesn't match. And so it's called rehabbing ballots. And you probably have the ability to go out and volunteer to do that. There's a big crew doing that right now in Clark County as we speak. So they're going to be out there rehabbing as many of these ballots as much as possible. And we'll have to see. If Joe Kent's numbers close substantially and he picks up, just for sake of argument, 7,000 or 8,000 votes between now and Saturday or now and Monday, Now you got something that you're working with that it indicates that it truthfully is heading in his direction. But if the gap stays about the same after you count another 150, and I don't think it's 100,000 votes down that haven't been counted. I think there's a lot more than that. But cause it's 7 different counties, and so you'd have to look at all the uncounted votes for all 7 counties and add them up and then see. And then the ballots are going to come in from the post office in their marginally competent way of gradually collecting their ballots and getting it into the auditor's offices. So you just simply have to be involved in watching that. I would encourage you, if you live in that district, to volunteer. If you have never done this before, it's a good thing to go out and do and get involved in. Rehabbing ballots can make a big difference. And so I think that's important. Now, what's different is this question that you mentioned here. Governor race called for Ferguson when 700,000 votes still are not counted, including in-person votes in King County. Any vote centers were packed. The vote centers were packed. Yes, they were in King County. I talked to people who went down there and voted in person at the King County elections, and they were bitter critters about it. They didn't want people doing that. But there were a lot of people who went down and did it. However, the difference in the governor's race is a substantially larger gap than and same with lieutenant governor, treasurer, auditor, secretary of state. The only one I would say that's of that crew that's closer is the public lands commissioner race. It's distantly potential. If you saw a big change where Jamie Herrera Butler got closer to Upgrove, wait and watch on that one. But I think you could easily call it for Ferguson at this point in time. That amount of math, you're just not going to make that up. But of course, you can just ignore them and sit there and wait a week, which is what most people would do, just to see where the trend lines go, which is why you don't get people conceding races for a week or two in Washington. Are our leaders being installed in Washington? And if so, what can we do? Can Trump administration help? It's not about installation. It's about the dishonesty of the media, which is as close to useless and corrupt as you could ever have. Now, the Seattle Times is essentially just a propaganda arm for the state Democrat Party, as is the Tacoma News Tribune, the Bellingham Herald, the Olympian, whatever papers are left that still pretend to exist in our state and pretend that they commit acts of journalism on occasion. King 5 News, the same crews. They're thoroughly in the tank and completely incompetent, and they'll never report the truth under any circumstances unless absolutely forced to do so. They're going to do whatever they're told by their political leadership, and it's just unfortunate because it means you can never get if people rely on these entities still for finding out what's going on, they'll never know the truth about what's happening, or at least they'll certainly not get an alternative idea. So from that perspective, yes, you've corrupted the system, and the information that people get is never going to be honest. So you really have to do is find a way to bypass that and communicate to people directly, which is why Bob Ferguson sponsored HB 1333 a couple years ago, which failed and didn't get through the legislature, and it was unconstitutional and illegal on top of it, because they want to censor people and prevent you from providing alternative perspectives. That's the greatest threat to political corruption and power in Washington State, is this effort to communicate the truth to people, or at least an alternative voice to them, from a conservative perspective. That's the last thing they want. They will do anything they can to censor you. Silencing me, attacking other people, that's their priority. Trump could help a lot. One of the things they could do is to be aggressive and pushing back against censorship efforts, whether it's by big tech or government-sponsored big tech. They could also just help us clean up the voter rolls here and fix some of the voter ID issues and defective voting systems that we have in our state. And some of that could be done federally, but we'll see how it goes. So anyway, let's see. Here's J2 Shadow. Appreciate Reichert encouraging those of us who are discouraged not to leave the state. Sometimes it's tempting. Seems like we're just awash in blue brainwash. Well, here's the thing. You have a lot of people in Washington State who share your same concerns. Not as many of them vote for it. There's definitely some issues, and I've addressed this in a video that'll be coming out shortly too, like I did last week, just on some ridiculous infighting on the Republican side, and maybe I'll get to that while I'm still going here tonight. But it's not confined to whatever faction of the Republican Party that you don't like. The truth is that factions that I sometimes feel like I'm more aligned with on the conservative side make the same, not the same, but similar mistakes that those who are on the more, they can call themselves mainstreamers or whatever they want to call themselves, but there's problems from both factions that are actually the same behavior. It's just as equally self-destructive, and it's probably facilitated by people who are trying to encourage division, and that infighting obsession creates exceptionally ridiculous results. The second legislative district was the example that I addressed last week, where the House Republican Organizing Committee, which is the PAC arm, along with the Reagan Fund and others, squandered all their resources, essentially fighting Republican infighting things, and they were so incompetent that they actually lost pretty much every Republican infighting battle that they were fighting. But what the heck were they thinking? They could have spent that money to actually help whichever Republican prevails in the primary to actually take a seat in the legislature. It doesn't even mean I disagree with their initial choices in some cases with who they thought was the optimal candidate in a Republican fight, but it was absurd the amount of, they spent about 1.4, 1.5 million. I have to go back and look now. And the worst one was afterwards. When you get, because of our top two primary system, you get two Republicans facing off with each other, to engage in that race and then try to tip the scales, and they lost that one too, is just foolish and incompetent. Whatever consultants are remotely associated with that group, those should be definitely banned from, they should be sent back to kindergarten or something, some way of just not engage. I mean, it's just foolish self-destruction. The Democrats will do the same kind of fighting sometimes, so don't pretend that that's like a lone signature element to Republicans, but it's a lot harder to, when you have more limited resources, you control no levers of power, to be fighting over who wants to be king of the molehill just because at your country club meeting on the weekends you don't like certain people to show up there. It's just a ridiculous attitude, and I think it's something that needs a lot of work. Let's see. I'm going to jump around here a little bit. I got a lot of stuff popping up here, and it's hard for me to stay on top of this. Julie Anderson, the party put no effort into our legislative district representatives. Probably that's not true, but I also think you probably have an unrealistic expectation for exactly what the party does. I think you're going to have examples all over the place of where the party, either at a local level, meaning the county, or the state level, usually more with money and data support, actually did probably help a lot of these ledge districts, but they couldn't help them all. Now, the other thing to remember about ledge districts is most of those are theoretically supported by House Republican Organizing Committee and the Reagan Fund, which is generally tied in together, and their money is what mostly comes from lobbyists, but that money gets directed to help improve the Republican caucus count in the legislature. And that one does seem to be co-opted by just egregiously incompetent decision-making processes that seem to make it unlikely that they can overcome their own problems. Now, again, people have to watch over the next week to see exactly what the shakedown in the legislature is going to be. It isn't. I couldn't tell you what that is right now because of the closeness of a lot of these races that some of us didn't think would be that close, but they are right now, and the late-breaking ballots and where they're going to go. We're not going to know that from the week. I'll probably be able to do a video on that next week. I can't do it right now. Keith Swank was definitely Beverly York. Keith Swank was definitely elected Pierce County Sheriff. Congratulations, Keith. It does look like he is far enough ahead. That's probably true, but my guess is that I think that they're still waiting to double check on how the ballots go, or the last part of it is moving. Let's see. Scenario Frankenstein, how do we get all electoral college voting system on a state level? Well, you have to change the state constitution. The primarily rural and conservative counties are not being fairly represented, and in fact, they're probably being abused because the urban representatives care not at all. In fact, I think they generally hate most people that live rurally. They kind of want to put you in like a village and live a certain way that they want to tell you how to live, and but they don't want you to tell them how to live. You know, it's a classic case of central control, but. You would have to change state constitution. It's probably legal, and the way that would work is you'd basically set up 39 counties around something like an electoral college sort of an approach to running for office. But Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Jeremy Jennings is Jared catching up to the traitor Dan. And this is I mentioned this earlier, but the 4th Congressional District, it's actually closer, I think, between Sessler and Dan Newhouse than it is between Joe Kent and Marie Glusenkamp in the 3rd. But, of course, that race will get more attention because, depending on who wins, changes balance of power in D.C. The truth is, in the 4th Congressional District, which is that central Washington district, incumbent Newhouse and Sessler, challenger Sessler, they're both Republicans. So there's a little bit less attention that's paid to that. However, the gap is closer, and depending on how the next couple cycles of ballot counting goes, Sessler, if he's closing the gap, is going to be feeling positive about momentum, and we'll see how it goes. He can close that. We've witnessed plenty of races in Washington State that closed gaps of that size before, so we'll have to see for a week how the counts go. Let's see. The only hope for Washington at this point is Nightwolf. The only hope for Washington at this point is if Trump follows through with cutting any federal assistance aid to sanctuary cities and states. I think that's a great policy. I hope he does that. It'll save the feds money. That money won't come here, get squandered and used to abuse us. So I think that's positive. What'll happen is if they don't send it, the state legislature will probably squander the reserve funds that Washington State has to carry those policies forward for a while, but eventually they run out of money, and then you're back to ground zero, and it's a little bit less money, billions less anyway, that they're going to be using to abuse you with this tax dollars. But that's not the only thing. There's a bunch of other things that I think the federal administration should be doing in helping us clean up our voter rolls and fix some of those issues. Let's see, Rex here. How can a newly elected governor pledge to act against a newly elected president of the United States of America? Did the Washington State really vote for Ferguson? Yes, they did vote for Ferguson. You can always have a governor that says they're going to disagree with the president. That's happened a lot. Please don't think that only happens when Democrat governors and Republicans exist. You'll have it the other way around, too. And if you were in a Republican state that had a Republican governor resisting Democrat policies you didn't like, you'd love it. So it does happen on both sides. Yes, Ferguson's dishonest and corrupt, and he's not a good guy. But it isn't unusual that you would have, and he's got a history of fighting with Trump, and that's his big claim to fame. So we'll see how it goes. Tona Carlo, party. I don't know why you started out the question that way, but it says no George Soros riots, and they prepared for a huge National Guard fight, but we hear crickets. Well, actually, I did have the flyers of the Antifa guys up in Seattle. They got together at Cal Anderson Park, had their own mini riot, trashed the city as they always do, had a few of them get arrested, and that was kind of the extent that I'm aware of up there. Maybe they'll get a little more organized and have a bunch more riots for the heck of it, but I don't sense the same level of enthusiasm that the left has had in the past for rioting. Maybe they'll start to do that over the next couple of years as things go on, but we'll see how it goes. Derek Pletcher, yes, I'm very concerned about, I don't blame you, Ferguson's dishonest and corrupt, but it's up to you and I to do a better job exposing him to the people that he was able to lie to get voted. He knew that he had to lie. He ran a whole campaign on lies, that he cared about public safety, which he has no evidence in his background that supports that. So, a liar's going to always come out and do dishonest and criminal things, or he's going to have to govern very differently than he did in the AG's office, so we'll have to see. Let's see. Milo Henderson, given the fact that Dave Reichert had less money than Fergie, I thought Reichert quite well with voters. Your thoughts, Glenn? Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm going to make a judgment on that probably when I get a little more data on the next million ballots that get counted. That'll give me a sense of efficiency of the dollars that were spent and effectiveness of the campaign. I know I've been on the record many times. I had a lot of problems with the consultants that Reichert used, but Reichert was definitely coming into this a better setup than most candidates since at least 2012. Rob McKenna probably had the best campaign going into his governor's race since 2004 anyway. And so he seemed to have that momentum in his direction. And people who've gone back and observed and looked closer, they'll understand better on why he lost. But Reichert, we're going to have to look at this a little bit and see what the difference was. And the difference between his and Culp's numbers, I think, would be interesting to review and see where it goes. I got to try to get to these questions, guys. I realize I am running light on time, and I'm going to skip here just to get to questions. Nightwolf, would Trump cutting any assistance aid to sanctuary cities and states bring Olympia to its knees? No, it won't initially, but what it would do, it would cause them to divert money from other things, and less money government gets, the better off we all are. The money's used to just abuse you, and they don't do what they say they're going to do with it, and they waste it on stupid stuff, and then they really purposely cut off the things you really do want. We want public safety, so that's the first thing they cut. We actually want our kids to learn in schools if we do send them to public schools, and they'll cut things that actually matter, and then they'll put in stupid stuff that they want to fund because that's how it goes. Let's see. Brian, yep, needs to get back to same-day voting. Don't disagree, but we'll see how it goes. Derek, does anyone here know if the gas tax got voted in? It was not a gas tax getting voted in. It was a gas tax getting voted out, and it was not voted out. Not enough people remembered to vote yes, pay less. So instead, they voted no to pay more and get less. So, but again, that's only temporary for now. So we'll see how it goes in the future. Let's see. I'm trying to get to questions here, guys. Freebird, in the 1990s, it took one night to count votes. We had all the results in one day. Now it takes days or weeks. How have we gone backwards? Are we not supposed to be advancing in society? Well, again, if you let leftists run your country or your community, you're never going to advance. You do always regress. You regress in public safety, you regress in education, you regress in just normal life. And voting is a big part of it. You know, and it is funny because even today, I believe India has the ability to count, 3 times the amount of votes as America counts, maybe 4 times as many. And they're able to get the whole thing done in 3 days. And because they it's all in person, dip your finger in ink, you voted, do all that. That country seems to have the ability to do it. Washington State has regressed. We're worse than most third world countries when it comes to voting practices. And I think when it becomes a general recognition that we need to fix it, I think you would see actually quite a bit different results in our state. But it takes a lot of work. Derek, you also mentioned, as soon as the polls closed, Maria Cantwell won without even saying all the votes counted. Well, the votes are far from counted. The reason why they said she won is just really had to do more with the margin of victory and the statistical likelihood of the remaining ballots being able to shift that in a different direction. Again, if you're within just a few points, you really can't call it yet until the majority, I think, of the next million ballots are counted. Let's see. Where were the Republicans? Kathleen, I'm not sure what you're talking about. There were Republicans everywhere. I speak to their groups all of the time. There were Republicans that won many races all around the state. We did not win statewide races. I do feel some optimism for the Supreme Court justice, as I mentioned earlier. It'd be good to win that race, even though it's nonpartisan. On the Republican side, that's usually where common sense and English and math actually are believed. We actually know what women are, and we don't play the pronoun game, and it'd be nice to have somebody in the Supreme Court who has that level of functionality in them, and they've read the state constitution and believe it's real. So it'd be good to get somebody like that in there. Let's see. Aaron Jones, yeah, you pointed out the bad problems with that impact statement. That was purposely done by the Democrats and Bob Ferguson. It was a way to try to influence people and tip the scales. And the way it was drafted, it wasn't supposed to apply to these. But of course, the laws get manipulated later on, and we don't have honest judges in our state. Most of our judges are quite corrupt and very political. And so that made it very difficult for people to overcome it. I think that was probably more of a deciding factor even than the $42 million of negative ad campaigns that came out to attack the initiatives. And again, that's money diverted away from the left and sent on an opposition to a much lower cost political campaign to try to get people to reduce their cost of living. But this is the first step in that direction. We'll see where it goes from there. Let's see, it shouldn't impact representation at all. It shows that a lot of minorities are conservatives. If anything, GOP is a much more diverse party now. It is, probably. I mean, it's certainly statistical federal races are indicating this, and there is clearly a realignment going on nationally, and that's impacting us at a state level too, where the realignment is largely a bunch of elite leftists that live in their enclaves, and perhaps people that get direct cash payments from them with government programs, kind of so this barbell effect where these two different groups are kind of tenuously linked together versus everybody else that actually have to work for a living and lives in the real world. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that that's really where it goes, but I do see it continuing that way, and racial differences are not the deciding factor here at all. It's really more about, as much as the left hates people, they like to divide people up by race, I don't think that's how most people see themselves. And so, I have to work with all kinds of people around the state everywhere I go. And there's allies of every race and creed and religion you can imagine that I work with on a lot of open government issues and corruption issues, trying to expose them in government. And I think the average person's really upset, and it doesn't matter what race you're with. They don't like what they see government becoming. And that doesn't matter whether you're talking about the pet squirrel being killed, Peanut the squirrel over in New York, if you don't know that story. I'm going to try to do a video on it probably next week, because it's kind of a classic Tales of Tyranny case. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. This is a question from Wayne Bethune. Is the GOP dead in Washington? Well, I don't think so, but I don't know that people necessarily understand the nature of a political party and what it can and cannot do. I think people putting their faith in a political party is one of the most foolish things you can do, second only to putting your faith in politicians. They're tools to move the freedom and liberty agenda forward and nothing more. There's things they can do well. There's a lot of things they can't. Presuming they can do everything is a big mistake. And hanging your hat on that, I think, is also a big mistake. If you want to make an impact, I think you can be involved with the party, but you also have to just practically sit down and do things and not try to outsource your freedom to them, assuming that they're going to be the ones who go out and carry the standard forward. A lot of good people are involved in party stuff. I go around the state all the time. I'm a emceed a lot of Lincoln Day dinners. I speak at a lot of them. I'll continue to do so. I'm here to help. I'm a Republican PCO where I live in Thurston County. But most of the work that I see done is sort of outside of the party. It's done in organized groups that are focused on issues locally in your community, or issues that matter to the state, or investigations of corruption. Whatever it is you're doing, and those aren't party functions, and the party can't do those things. And it's actually horrific to try to assume the party would do those things, because they can't do it well. Party leadership turns over like a hamster wheel all the time. So even if you had a really functioning party that was doing great in a county, whatever faction's not in power comes in, they throw out the old, try to start the new. I've seen this 100 times. It doesn't, it makes it very difficult to have a continuity. By the way, the left figured this out a long time ago. The Democrat Party doesn't do a lot either. If you ever go and infiltrate their meetings or send people to go to their meetings, as I do on a fairly frequent basis, you'll find that those guys aren't really accomplishing or achieving a lot either. Now, they may be benefiting, but they're benefiting in the sense, and they can take credit for things that are actually done by these outside groups, Soros-funded organizations, grant grifting operations that keep a lot of their activists employed. I mean, there's all kinds of these things that are going on, and once people are more familiar with it, we'll see how it goes ahead. Deanne Sanderson, and so going back to that, the party is not your path to salvation. It's a tool that you can use to help promote and get better policies in the play down the road. But most of the hard and heavy work, I think, ends up being done outside the party, and I think that's always been the case. Either party. It doesn't even matter which party you're talking about. You said gas tax initiative is ahead. I meant natural gas ban initiative. That's true, I did. I can't believe people didn't vote yes to repeal carbon tax. Well, they probably didn't understand it after the $42 million ad campaign and the dishonest writing with the impact statement in the beginning. Why isn't the term moderate used more? People shouldn't have to pick teams. They should just want what's best for the country using logic. Well, everybody's always going to say that that they are the ones that I'm moderate. I feel like I'm moderate. I feel like I'm pretty middle of the road. But in the big scheme of things, I'm going to be more on the conservative, maybe libertarian side of this spectrum than anybody else. And so if you can represent yourself honestly, everybody says they're moderate. I hear the term moderate used all the time. And in the end, you're going to pick people based. The only value of partisan affiliation tends to be that it orients that you can at least say, okay, I know that if you're a Democrat, there's no way that you're in favor of freedom and liberty for people. You're going to be hostile to most of our civil rights in our state. You want to take away our guns. You want to silence our free speech. You want you don't know what a woman is. You don't believe math is real. There's a lot of things that you can assign categorically based on those policy platforms that those parties have. It's not universal. You're going to run into Democrats that don't believe that stuff, and they're affiliated with the Democrat Party because they think that's a path to power. The Republican side, you're going to see the same thing. You'll see people in Eastern Washington in particular, in districts, Idaho has this a lot, where you have people who call themselves Republicans, but they actually believe nothing that you do as a Republican. They're just seeing that as a path to power, call themselves Republican. They'll vote for a tax increase or a stupid leftist idea tomorrow because they don't even care. They just call themselves a Republican because that was a way to get into office. That kind of stuff does happen a lot, more than it should be. Question here, this is a good one. Where can the updated vote count numbers be found? You can find them in the Washington State Secretary of State's race. You can just Google or search on a search engine, Washington State Secretary of State elections, and it'll go there. If you're interested, do Washington Secretary of State elections research, and you can actually go back and look at historical data. I think it's really helpful if you go back and you look at historical data and compare year to year. Now, you can't compare today's numbers in Washington State to 2020 or 2016 or 2012 because our numbers are far from done. We have another weeks of counting, another million votes or so. So it's going to take a little while. But anyway, so we'll see how it goes. VTRAC, Republicans are watching much more closely in the battleground states this time, and it was harder to cheat. And I agree with that statement. It wasn't not a question, but I still like it, so I posted it up here. Let's see. Tanker Jag, what do you think of Trump appointing Pete Serrano as U.S. Attorney in Washington? He could keep Ferguson and Brown somewhat in check. Oh, I would love that. I think that's a good idea, actually. Great suggestion. There's probably a few other people that are also on his list for local attorney general, U.S. attorney in Washington. I definitely think Angus Lee would be a good choice. I mean, there's some others. So I think that it would make a big difference to get somebody like that in as our district attorney or federal district attorney. Could be a big difference, actually. Lots of people turning their mail-in ballots on Election Day. Each envelope has to then have the signature compared before they can be opened and the vote counted. That's true, and that is why there's a million of them still sitting out there. Ferguson is bad news. Yes, he is, and he certainly doesn't like me. And just for the record, I don't have any suicidal thoughts. I love my wife. My brake lines work in my car, and my gas lines don't leak at home, just in case Ferguson and his friends decide that Jeffrey Epstein program is the new approach that he wants to take. Are people forgetting that Trump is still going to continue to say horrible things, though? How's the public supposed to react? I mean, listen, if you don't know that about Trump now, you just woke up from a coma, I suppose. Again, I'm Secretary of State site, so that's just yeah. Jack Podler, we don't get hurricanes here, but we do get Ferguson, and give me the hurricane. Well, you can lose your house, I guess, down in Florida if you want. Let's see. What do you think? Here we go. Penn the Mighty. Do you think the new DOJ might step in to investigate some of the DA's judges? What about the IRS and the mutual aid nonprofits? I don't know. I doubt the IRS is going to get that involved in the mutual aid nonprofits. That's not historically been stuff that they do. I think a Department of Justice could step in and investigate some of the open corruption grifting schemes, and that would be good if they could do that. I mean, there's a federal nexus there with federal funds that get mixed in with state funds, and according to the federal law, they can investigate a lot of those types of cases, and I think there's some good stuff there. But good news for the country, bad news for Washington State, some of it. But also, listen, these things need to become foundational times, and we just have to see where we're going. Patrick Radcliffe, who's your choice for state GOP chairman? I don't know if that race is officially on yet. I am a pretty big fan generally of Jim Walsh. I am. I'm going to tell you right now I am. If you think that that you can run it better, I doubt it, and you're going to get in there and find that that's not the case. I have been through this process now every few years since 2010 when I was really first engaged in this, and it's I've seen the spectrum of people that have come and gone in that position, and Jim Walsh is probably one of the better communicators they've ever had in there, one of the best people to reach out and do stuff. I haven't seen that we've had a history of that. Fundraising's been good despite what the paper said. Generally, the fundraising now is way better than it used to be. But again, there's always going to be people that don't like what's going on. This is one of the challenges. Again, it's one of the reasons why you're not going to ever see me run for chair of the state party. I never will. And I'm not going to run for county party chair either. I don't think I'd be effective in that position. There's other things that need to be done. And I think I'm more effective doing focusing the fight for liberty and freedom somewhere else out there. Ferguson is worse than Inslee is a question from Ewokus Amokus. And the answer is yes, it is. Ferguson is worse than Inslee in many ways. Inslee was just lazy and not that bright. I think Ferguson's reasonably intelligent and just, he's openly self-promoting and corrupt. So that makes him probably worse. Let's see. Yes, Freebird, I'll take mean tweets if it means protecting America. I agree. One of the, it is just the way it is. Let's see. Julie Morton, I watched the election results for us last night. I'm so depressed and dejected, which is what they want you to be. Is there a way to somehow go back to paper ballots and start same-day voting? There is. We're going to need some federal help on that, though, I think. Holy cow. There's so many questions here, guys. I'm going to try to just get to a couple more. I realize I'm running late, and I don't want to keep it up too long. There's a lot of questions here. It's been very hard for me to even come close to touching bases on all of them. Looks like a couple thousand people logged on tonight. So I'm sorry if I wasn't able to get to your question. And maybe I have to do more of these live streams. I'm surprised. Anyway, there's a lot of questions coming in. But anyway, it would be a much different race if electoral were awarded that way rather than winner takes all. And I'm assuming that's a response to what I was talking about earlier. You'd have to change the state constitution to get to that. And you'll have tremendous resistance. The Democrats don't want that idea. They don't like the electoral college idea. They just want to have a concentrated power base in a city, and then they figure they can control everybody else from there. What do you make of Washington being the only state in the nation besides one district in Maine that swung more left than in 2020? I think there's a huge problem with our voter rolls in the state. I'm going to say it now, and I've said it for years, and I'm one of the few people that's been, and I'm not the only one. Trust me, there's a great team of people here that have risked a lot to be involved in this process because nothing I've done ever generates more threats and accusations and dishonest media stories than being involved in trying to do voter roll cleanup. And so I really think that if we could clean that up, we would fix a lot of problems that we currently believe that we have. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to get that. Klickitat County voter here, Isaac Collier. My ballot still hasn't been processed. How long should I wait, and who should I contact if I continue to not get confirmation? It depends on when you send it in. If it's been received, then they'll probably process it in the next couple days in Klickitat County. If you say that it hasn't been received at all and you sent it out weeks ago, you're in trouble. If you just sent it out the day of election, they may not receive it for another week. Your post office is not efficient. Please don't pretend it is. There's all kinds of problems with the post office, and there's a lot of work that we have to do. Let's see. Harry Toe 1, I know so many people who were confused by the wording in all four initiatives. Why was it worded so badly? Because the state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, with support from Inslee and Ferguson, decided to change that law. The Republicans opposed it, but they were outvoted. It got put in as a impact statement that they could. And by the way, the way it was written isn't the way it got implemented. They actually went back and did. They reinterpreted it differently than the way it was written to make it apply now to everything that could potentially reduce the grifting operations. So anyway, that's how it goes. And that's what made it hard. And this is the first time that it's been used since that law was passed. And it was definitely a problem. And I think it was much more of a problem. Let's see. Keep going. Down here for some questions. Let's see. Agent Mind, what are the next steps for the initiatives that didn't get through? Well, if they don't get through, you could rerun them again and try some future version of them. That is one path you can go down, and that's happened before, so that's an option. There's more to it than that, and we get a little bit more complicated into some of the other paths of things that need to be addressed and fixed and things that we can address and fix. I'd encourage you, though, right now, I can't get to all the questions. There's a lot of them here, but what I would say is that If you want to be more engaged and involved, particularly if you live in the 3rd or the 4th or one of these legislative districts where they're very close in numbers, they need help with rehab, volunteer. I think the state Republican Party generally is directing people who are skilled or want to be involved in the ballot rehab process. They'll help get you trained. Sometimes they're paying people to run out, and for a week or two, you're just going to go around and help collect these ballots and make sure they get properly recorded, and a good percentage of those are Republican ballots mostly. So be willing to engage, and you can make a difference and help swing some of these districts by as much as a few thousand votes with the ballots that were rejected based on signature match or not having a signature at all. So that's one thing you can do right now. Short of that, I'm going to just close on a couple of thoughts of other things you can do. We oftentimes have a deficit of people who are running for office who take that process seriously. Running for public office is not a good idea to have something just suddenly occur as a vision in your dream or your sleep, and you wake up one day and decide you're going to run. That makes you an ineffective campaigner, makes you a fairly useless candidate, and you absorb a lot of resources and time and energy when you probably really have no significant plan of success. It's much more helpful and much more likely to encourage success if you have a longer-term plan ahead, plan 2, 4, 6 years ahead of time, and become a subject matter expert, adequate enough to really understand what's going on, but also engage in the community. I think people, understandably so, are actually more conservative voters than you realize. The left will oftentimes falsify the background of their candidates to make it seem like they were engaged in the community in some way. If they've had more time, they'll actually get them engaged in the community in some way. Again, even if it's just resume padding, at least it looks like that person's been involved and engaged for a while. They don't do that by accident. They do that because that is an influencing factor in who you vote for, oftentimes in elections. They want that history. If you decide you want to run for public office, suddenly waking up one day and running for Congress is a path to failure, as it has been the last several hundred times I've watched people do that. You won't win that way, but you could perhaps decide that you want to run for school board or city council first, and that'll help you get more experience with running for office and encourage you to build up a resume that makes it more likely that you can actually get elected to those higher positions. It's not that you have to do that to move up to higher office, but it's a more likely path of having success in getting there. The left has done this for decades, and it is generally a pretty effective tool. It's not the only thing, but please be aware of that. Also, if you're going to run for office, understand how to raise money, understand how to run campaigns, study some of this stuff in advance so that you give people a chance who actually do want to support and get you into office. Learn how to speak in public. Learn how to be speak extemporaneously in groups to all kinds of people. Learn how to doorbell effectively. And be the type of person that when you doorbell and a precinct, you're actually able to move the vote in your direction and not actually convince them not to vote for you. There's a lot of things like this I think we could do to make things a lot better. Look for ways to work with others in your community to make things better. And when you build coalitions to achieve success, it could be about a local tax, it could be about fixing a road, it could be other practical things and solutions you're trying to improve in your community. It's the best way to get started and engage, and for people to know that you really do care because you're actually out there trying to make a difference. Suddenly appearing on the scene when nobody knows you at all and you've only been a keyboard warrior your whole life, if that, or you just watched Fox News suddenly the last couple days, isn't the path to changing the country. It's just not going to be how it goes. Most of the success that builds up over time in advancing freedom and liberty tends to be something, in my opinion, that you grind at over years, and you build coalitions, and you have successes, and you have failures, and you learn from your failures to build more successes, and you learn from your successes, hopefully, to build more successes, and you build coalitions, and ultimately, over time, you do succeed. Now, that doesn't satisfy most people. Americans tend to be a Sunday afternoon, 2-hour special, solution-oriented society where we believe that we can actually solve the world's problems in that window of time, which is entirely unrealistic. But if we're willing to work hard, and I think most people on the conservative, freedom-oriented side of the spectrum, we are willing to do so and work hard to make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but our children, then engagement today and tomorrow and over time can do that. You will not always have success, but we are seeing some success in many places. Not every time, but boy, you certainly improve the odds if you're willing to do that and willing to work hard. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all your questions today. There's a lot of them. I'll try to do a better job next week. I have a video I'm going to try to launch either tonight or tomorrow, just on my initial results today, the day after the election. Covered some of what I discussed today. There'll be other issues I talked about there. But I do look forward to seeing you guys out there in the field, making a difference, making an impact in your communities, rebuilding and planning for practical solutions as we advance in the next couple days. So hope all's well, and thank you again. I'm going to end this video today with what I always say: the future does belong to those who show up. Thank you guys so much for showing up today, and I will try to be more effective and efficient next time when I have the next live stream, which should be a week from today. So hope all's well. Thank you guys so much once again, and I do look forward to seeing you out there in the field making a difference.